What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. And I am delighted to say I am joined today by Brad Wharton to look ahead to Cage Warriors 141. Some might call it the biggest card in the last few years for Cage Warriors. It's before UFC London, the 20-year anniversary, lots of big names on it. The lightweight title, which is a steep history, I suppose, in Cage Warriors, atop the card, and some of the best prospects as well on the card throughout it. Brad, how are you today? It's a very, very, very warm UK and Ireland these days, so I'm already sweating buckets here. You're better dressed than me with the kind of loose t-shirt. I'm here just dying, but we'll get through it anyway. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. As you can tell, I've had to break out the old Hotel Tropicana gear. It's very warm. It's too warm, I'll be honest. And much like you, I've had to turn the fan off while we're doing this. But
it's the worst.
I am looking forward to getting it back on afterwards.
What's the drink of choice today? So is it Vimto as always? Are you getting out a few lilts or a bit of Tropicana or something?
It's just water at the moment. It's just water. I'm swallowing it as fast as I'm sweating it out, so just keeping dehydrated. I might treat myself to a nice cold beer later on. Who knows? Nice.
Well, we're a few days out from the card anyway, so the performance won't be hindered by that.
Unless you're going to call 37 fights at the Cage Warriors Academy tomorrow morning.
All right. Okay. Well, maybe it will be so, but
looking forward to that.
God almighty, 37 fights. Oh God, that should be fun. I remember I went to that KSW show that was on in Dublin the day after one of my friends' 30th, and it was like a 2-hour drive away, and honest to God, I was just sitting there, and it was anyone that's been at a KSW show knows what a KSW show is like. It was like I was in the middle of a dream. It's so weird. So the day after is always an experience when you've had a few drinks the night before, but I'm sure you won't be going mad. There will be a few drinks had though next Friday night with the 20-year anniversary of Cage Warriors. Before we get into the card, it's crazy that Cage Warriors has been around for 20 years, and I know there was a bit of a hiatus, I suppose, around the middle. I suppose it would be. It was a good few years ago now at this age, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But Cage Warriors come back stronger than ever. Again, has some of the best talent. We've seen Ian Gary, Paddy Pimblett, Molly McCann, and others go. Over the last couple of years, and then before that, we know the likes of Bisping and Dan Hardy and Conor McGregor and all. Well, if you could sum up, it's a very hard thing to do, what Cage Warriors has meant, just to have like this known entity, I suppose, in mixed martial arts, for mixed martial arts in this side of the world for the last 20 years. Because, look, we've had some good places and good promotions putting on some good fights, but not with the consistency of Cage Warriors. And people can say there's positives and negatives for all different sorts of promotions, but the consistency with getting people to the UFC as well. It's an organisation not like many in the world is, and as someone who's obviously part of it now as well, it must be special to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, funnily enough, my first ever Cage Warriors show was the 10th anniversary, the first one I actually worked for them for. Obviously, I've been to many before as a journalist and before that a fan as well. So it was cool, like, coming in and like make it. My job at the time was to make video content around the 10th anniversary. And to be here 10 years later for 20th anniversary is just absolutely nuts. And I think you've got the nail on the head, mate. It's the consistency of it. It's become an institution in UK MMA now. There's been so many people go through the doors and achieve their dreams. And, for most young kids starting out in this sport, that the dream is to be a UFC world champion or to fight in the UFC at least. And Cage Warriors has just been that proven pathway for so many guys over the last 10, especially the last 10 years. If you look at everyone who's held a Cage Warriors title and then gone on to the UFC, so it's a very high percentage. So yeah, it's just an institution. It's great to be part of it. There's so many people working so hard behind the scenes that maybe we don't see and don't get enough credit, and it's just fantastic to be a part of a group like that. Leaving our little mark on this corner of the sport.
100%. I think the thing I've always been not shocked by, but like surprised by when I went to a cage warrior show. Like I've been to lots of obviously local shows around here, not as many because we don't have as many essentially, but a lot of local shows, they might take a cage from a gym, or it's, and they're doing their best. I'm not criticizing them or anything, but you've someone up and coming, maybe their first 3 or 4 fights fighting on a show like that, and then they go to cage warriors. And I remember the first cage warriors card I went to, or I went and covered was it the Pendred Shea Mills one, or maybe there was one before that, but anyway, it was in the Helix in Dublin, and I couldn't get over. We were inside interviewing, whoever it might have been, Graham or I remember once we were interviewing Joseph Duffy as well, and he come out, and the whole crew was there taking the cage apart. And it was like a crew of, I don't know, 6 or 7 guys or whatever it might be. And they were pulling it down as quickly as we were interviewing Graham or whatever it was. And I was like, there's a level of professionalism here, that you don't get in other places. And for the fighters to have, their walkout with their music, fighting in an octagon now as well, the same cage as they fight in the UFC. And it's just that step from, primary school to secondary school, I suppose, to college with the UFC, where Cage Warriors is at a kind of a level where it's different from regional or local MMA. And you can go on, you can watch your Fighting Fight Pass afterwards. You can listen to yourself and Dan Hardy and Dan Strauss as well, or Paul Redmond, as he did a great job the last time, giving the expert commentary on it. It's just a different sort of level, and I think that has really helped guys when they have gone to the UFC. And do you know what? It's actually probably hindered guys recently, because I spoke to Jai Herbert the other day, and I think lads have actually been getting tougher matchups because they've, I was going to call him Ian Dean, Sean Shelby and Maynard have kind of realised, I think, that the Cage Warriors Pat is very, different to any other Pat, and they're more ready than other guys, and that's been a bit tough, but it must be great. Before we get into the card as well, a few of the names that have come true. Some people that, is there any kind of story of someone you thought, seen a couple of their fights and think maybe this guy isn't going to be that next thing they kick on and they get to the UFC? Or is there anyone that stands out to you, any story that stood out to you over the 20 years in Cage Warriors that you always kind of think back on? I
mean, for me personally, a big one is always Paddy. From like knowing Paddy being very, very young and his first few amateur fights, to seeing him kind of come through the Cage Warriors system and how he sort of evolved and became like a legit star outside of the UFC, which, not many people do. Even, in other shows like Cage Warriors, for example, not every Cage Warriors champion is going to sell out a huge arena like the Echo Arena. So seeing Paddy go from like this skinny little kid with a shaved head, a little string bean lad of 16, beating a 24-year-old guy in his first ever fight, to sort of being this star and this kind of like almost a cultural icon in Liverpool. I remember being in, coming out of Lime Street Station and getting in a taxi, and the taxi drivers are talking about Paddy Pimblett. And it's just nuts, because in this country, and I'm sure in Ireland as well, outside of the Conor McGregors and the Michael Bispings, etc., it hasn't really permeated, the taxi driver conversation sort of level yet. So, to see Paddy and Chris Fishgold and Molly up on the big billboards around Liverpool was amazing. And to see him now in the UFC being successful and also, making a lot of money doing so, it's, for me, it's everything that's good about Cage Warriors. He was given the opportunity to develop. He was given fights that tested him. He didn't win them all. He was given the right fights, I think, at the right time in his career. He improved so much over those last 3 years with Cage Warriors, and he's in the UFC in a position where he's probably, the best he's ever been. Yeah,
and that's the one great thing about Cage Warriors, and I think fighters on this side of the pond are a bit lucky as well, because they have Cage Warriors, but they also have like the media that came up with McGregor, who I throw myself in there, give myself a pat in the back, but others as well who can get their name out. Like, look at Ian Gary, he does an interview with me. He talks about, not want to sign for Bellator. No one wakes up in the morning and want to sign for Bellator. The week after, he goes out and he gets a big knockout in Cage Warriors, and suddenly the star rises. And I feel like I put up a tweet the other day about Conor McGregor. It's like, we'll never see the likes of McGregor again in the UFC at the very top. But what we will see is people like McGregor, like Gary, like Paddy coming through Cage Warriors. Because it's a funny thing to say, but Paddy Pimblett in Cage Warriors was 1,000 times bigger than Conor McGregor in Cage Warriors, because Conor McGregor had already paved that path for him. So we're looking for the next Conor McGregor. Now, Paddy probably isn't going to be that, if you know what I mean, in certain ways, but his star was able to rise bigger because of it, and because of the media, and because of Cage Warriors being more of a known entity, and McGregor paved that pathway. So I think in future we're going to see more guys, whether it's Paul Hughes or whether it's one or two of the guys on the card we're just about to talk about. It's very, very fun and very cool to have something like that on our doorstep, and obviously you being part of it as well is very, very exciting for you. But let's get into the card anyway, because we could spend an hour talking about this. Maybe it's one for another podcast another day. It's a very, very good card. There are some fights in this. We could spend a half an hour talking about Agi Sardari versus Mike Figlak, but we'll start at the top, because we'll get into that in a second. Kyle Driscoll versus George Hardwick, obviously for the lightweight championship here. The first fight, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, where it's the American Cage Warriors guy coming over to fight the European Cage Warriors guy in Europe. When the American Cage Warriors started, it's something, and I won't lie now, it's not something I've been able to get into yet, but I think this might be the start of it, because it feels like Cage Warriors is for us, and Cage Warriors America is for them, kind of. And now that's probably not the way Graham Bylan or yourself or anyone wants it, but I think fights like this really will help. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on this one? It's a big fight for both guys, isn't it? Kyle Driscoll, who's almost in the UFC, he probably got unlucky the fact he was in the NOI Contender Series in 2020 and he won his fight well. I watched it yesterday. If it was a year later, if it was 18 months later, he'd probably be in the UFC now, because the NOI was signing everyone at that stage, but he got a bit unlucky. And whereas George Hardwick, we know how good he's been over the last while. Great fight, isn't it? But an important fight as well for Cage Warriors to maybe blend those two brands, something which Graham has always wanted.
Yeah, well, technically, if you go back to 2010, Cage Warriors had a couple of shows in America, and Jim Allers fought on those shows. He ended up coming and fighting in Europe and being the Cage Warriors champion. So, but yeah, since this kind of Cage Warriors California, this sort of SoCal fight scene that's so big over there, that is, as you say, very, very much for that part of the world. It feels like. So it's cool to finally have the two cross over. I think, Graham said from the start, the plan was, for always somewhere down the line, you maybe have, either a Cage Warriors US champion fighting a Cage Warriors Europe champion, or just have the one Cage Warriors title belt and have the guys who are winning in the US come over and vice versa. So it's exciting to see. I'm really looking forward to the fight. Like you say, Driscoll perhaps a little bit unlucky not to be in the UFC already. He's certainly doing everything right in the run-up. He's training with a great team at AKA. Obviously, there's been video and stuff of him training with Habib. So what this guy's going to do, right? We saw it in his last Cage Warriors fight. We saw it in his fight in the Contender Series. He's going to be coming out. He's going to be looking to drag Hardwick all over the mat, put him up against the cage, make it a real in-fight, nice and close, nice and gritty, and just grind him down. Hardwick is kind of the polar opposite. Like, he's just a wild man in the cage. He's going to be slinging elbows. He may be happy to be up close in the clinch where he can get some of these elbows off and more so going for the neck as well. We know he likes to jump on the neck. He's been training with the next gen guys. They've got big fights coming up in the UFC the day after. So you've got to believe the training atmosphere there is going to be absolutely fantastic. I know both him and his brother have been training up with the next gen guys. Obviously, his brother Harry had a great fight on the last Cage Warriors. Went to a draw, I believe, in a real slugfest. So look, we know what those guys bring. For me, the interesting factor here is what happens if it goes into the fourth and fifth round. Will Driscoll be able to keep his defenses up? Will he be able to keep that neck safe when he starts getting tired? Because we know that Hardwick's going to make him work and work and work. So for me, this is one that could well be decided in the championship rounds.
Yeah, it's a very interesting fight, and George Hardwick isn't getting any easy fights from Ian Dean anyway, because that Lucas Capera fight as well. I watched that, went back as well yesterday, and it's a really tough matchup for a striker like George Hardwick. But I think what you said there was a great point about the strikes from the clinch that George Hardwick does. Like, you can easily get caught up in looking at someone and they're this, kickboxer or taekwondo artist, whether it might be on the outside, and they can throw these lovely kicks and lovely, punches from the outside. But if you can't do that dogged work inside, you're going to be taken down and beaten by guys like Capera, by guys like Driscoll all the time. And I think that's one thing that Hardwick does very, very well, and something that I've been impressed by with him. And I think that's why Ian Dean has given him a matchup like this, that he's really, really good in those situations. And I'm interested to think, so yeah, sometimes you forget it's going to be 5 rounds, or it could be 5 rounds anyway. And it's interesting to see if, like, the obvious training that Hardwick has been putting into those positions over the last while will give him that sort of cardio. You know, we know wrestlers can wrestle for 5 rounds, kickboxers kickbox for 5 rounds, but when you put a kickboxer wrestling and a wrestler kickboxing, it can be a very, very different thing. And I wonder, will that, help Hardwick, the fact that he's been really, really concentrating on that, seemingly, from the outside over the last few years, help. And conversely, if Driscoll gets into a kickboxing match, will he be able to stand up to it?
Well, another interesting thing to think about as well is that Hardwick, this is the 3rd time he's been lined up for a Cage Warriors title fight. So he was supposed to fight Mehdi Ben Lakhdar, I believe, originally, and then he was supposed to fight an Italian guy in March. So he's trained for 2 title fights that he's not got. He only took that last fight against Capera because he wanted to compete. Obviously, Capera was coming off a loss, I believe, so they weren't going to do that for a title. And he was just like, look, just get me that fight. He's been training for a 5-round fight for the best part of maybe 9 months now. So you've got to believe, A, he's going to be ready for it, and B, he's going to be chomping at the bit to get in there. He believes that this title should have been around his waist back in December of last year. So he's going to be having no intentions of going back up to the northeast without that gold around his waist. And Driscoll the same. He wants to come in. His last 2 fights, as you say, on the Contender Series, maybe unlucky not to get signed. He went to a decision. He went to a decision in his last fight, and he spoke before that last fight about wanting to get that kind of trademark finish, wanting to really go out there and put it on a guy. He didn't get that. So there's going to be the onus on him as well. He doesn't just want to win a boring 5-round decision, taking a guy down, laying on top of him. He's going to want to smash Hardwick. He's going to want to finish him. And I think that's all the ingredients for a great fight.
What about the co-main event then? The flyweight title is on the line. Sam Creasey against Dylan Hazan. I don't know, is there a fighter in the world that has a weirder last 2 fights than than Sam Creasey? Obviously with the guillotine choke that kind of never was, and then the missing weight and losing to Shanks in a non-title fight, so he kept his title, and obviously Shanks wasn't going to get that fight again after that. How before we get to the actual fight itself, to Hazan, how big of a fight is this mentally for Sam Creasey? Because a lot of people would wilt under that. We've seen Creasey before. He's lost fights and come back, and he's gone on great runs after big losses and things and knockouts. It's a massive fight for Sam Creasey here, isn't it? Just from a mental point of view, before we get into anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody wants to be hanging onto a title belt on a technicality. I'm sure if it was up to Sam, he'd have given Shanks the belt afterwards. He's that kind of guy. He's a true martial artist. That's kind of who he is as a person. And that's kind of a shadow hanging over him at the moment. How he reacts to that mentally, I would say he's probably going to react to it okay. This is he's not an 18-year-old kid in his first couple of fights. He's been around the block. He's been fighting for a long time now. He knows the score. And he knows what he's got to go and do. But yeah, I think definitely at the back of his mind somewhere, there's got to be that little thing of, well, look, you got to earn this belt, and you got to do that by winning fights. And he's going to go and want to make an example out of Dylan Hazan. It's a great fight as well. Like Dylan Hazan is a monster. What is he, 8-0 now in his career? His last fight against Bruno, he almost got submitted with a calf slice or something. It was great that your co-commentator Dan was on there to run through that jiu-jitsu battle there at the very start of that fight, and to come through something like that and win. He fought Josh Reed as well. If you beat Josh Reed, I've said it many times, you're a good fighter, because the only good fighters beat Josh Reed. He can do it all. He can strike, he can wrestle. I think his striking is improving, but he's an absolute beast when you push him against the cage when he's wrestling and things. It feels like it's
the guy on the way up, the next star, the next guy to maybe go to the UFC against the guy that's been hanging around a long time and maybe hasn't got that opportunity or has got the losses maybe at the wrong time to move there, and he's 34 years of age now against the guy who's 27, so there's that 7 years on it. Dylan Hazan, I'm sure you've watched his fights. I know he's fought in FCC outside of Cage Warriors as well on his way up. I'm sure you've watched him since the very, very start. Or actually, was it FCC over in Italy he fought?
It was FCC, but it's not the one in Bolton.
not the one in Bolton. But I haven't said that. Sure, it could be Lake Como and Bolton. They're very, very similar. You'd mix them up pretty easy. But he's a very good fighter either way, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, the food's better in Bolton. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, look, Dylan Hazan, let's be honest, he's looked pretty bulletproof, right? The only time he hasn't looked bulletproof was in the end of that last round against Reed, where he got all his teeth punched out, and his corner man was in the cage afterwards, having to go around and pick all his teeth up off the cage floor. Dude's a lunatic. He didn't look fazed by it at all. I think it was a big knee that he took from Reed that knocked all his teeth out. But yeah, he seemed to maybe have just got a little bit tired from all the wrestling, and that's probably on Reed as well for how good he is defensively. So again, this for me is one where I really want to see this one in round 4 and 5, because we know that Creasey can just go and go and go and go. We saw against his fight against Araik, he was just like a takedown machine, which something we've maybe not seen a massive amount of him from him before. But we know he can strike, we know he can land combinations, we know his movement is great, he can get in and out. So the question is early, can he keep Dylan Hazan off him? Because we know if Hazan gets a hold of you, you're going to end up on your back and you're going to get punched in the face a lot. That's just a matter of fact. So can he keep Hazan away from him early on, and can he then capitalize later on? And for Hazan, it's the exact same thing in reverse. He needs to be in Sam Creasey's face from the first bell. I think the earlier in the fight, the better the chance Dylan Hazan has to get the finish. The later in the fight, the veteran Creasey can pull something crazy at the books. We know he's got submissions. We know he's got powerful strikes that kind of don't look that powerful, but can send you a bit loopy. So very, very interested to see how this one plays out. I think we talked about the title situation being in the back of Creasey's mind. I think we have to say the same thing for Hazan as well. Cage Warriors are going to Italy at some point this year. Graham Boylan's talked about it on social media. He's going to have it in the back of his mind. Well, hang on a second. I want to be in the main event of that show. I want to be going into that show as Cage Warriors champion. I don't know if you saw it on social media, but Alfredo posted a picture of his local football team, and they had a big banner up in the stadium for his last fight. So Hazan's got a big following in Italy. Like he's very popular over there. So for him to go into an Italy show later in the year as Cage Warriors champion, you've got to believe that's in the back of his mind every night he goes to sleep before this fight.
Yeah, and some people rise to that pressure and other people fall. So we will see. I think this is a fight, as you said, I think we know who'll win this fight in the first round, to be honest, because I think if Hazan can go in there, and this is really two guys who like to push forward and who like to take control of the fight, and I think whoever takes control of that fight early will continue to keep it, and it'll be an interesting one. But as you say, Creasey, you can never rule him out of it. We haven't seen that from Hazan yet, basically because he's been destroying everyone. So very, very good fun fight, and one of those fights, one guy maybe gone up and one guy kind of at the top. We'll see who overtakes who. So a very fun one. The next two fights, I think the cage is going to have to be reinforced for these ones because there's so much muscle coming into this. Mick Stanton against Darren Stewart and Jim Wallhead against Skibinski. It feels like a long time since I've thought about the name Jim Wallhead, and going back watching these fights this week. He hasn't fought since 2019, and he's fought in the UFC, and he's fought in Bellator, and he's coming back now to Cage Warriors, and he's fought some very, very big names down through the years. It'll be great to see Judo Jim back at Skibinski. This guy, I was so impressed with him. Watching his fights, preparing for obviously his fight against Justin Burlinson at the last at Cage Warriors 135. it's going to be a tough matchup between the two of them, but Stanton against Stewart as well, I think that's another one, two kind of veterans of the scene. So these are kind of the fights that anything could happen in them, I think. What's your breakdown of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just quickly on Darren Stewart versus Mick Stanton. I mean, what more do you want? Like, these two guys just going to go and punch each other's faces in for 15 minutes. It's going to be absolutely great. We know both guys can wrestle a bit as well. I think that'll probably cancel each other out. It's a big step up for Stanton. I think that's fair to say. It's probably the best guy he's fought in his career so far. Darren Stewart, the results weren't going his way towards the end of that USC run, but he wasn't losing to just anybody. He was losing to dangerous guys, and we know he's dangerous himself. Like I say, he's going to have a point to prove. It's a real do or die fight for Darren. And I think it is for Mick as well. I think it's probably going to decide Mick's career trajectory as well. So a lot on the line between these two guys. And we know both of them in an ideal world would love to just stand in the middle of the cage and throw punches at each other. So very much looking forward to that. Having Jim Wallhead back, he's fought in the UFC, he's fought in Bellator, he's fought in BAMMA, he's fought in Cage Warriors, he's fought everywhere. He came up through some of the classic Cage Warriors shows back in the day. Part of that Rough House team with Dan Hardy, Paul Daly, Andre Winner, all those guys. So having Jimmy back for the 20th anniversary is really cool. Obviously, it can be interesting to see how he is after 3 years out of the cage. I know he's had time to let a lot of niggling injuries heal, and I know he feels that the pressure's off him. He's happy now, ending his career kind of where it started, and he's just happy to go out, enjoy himself, and have fun with no pressure on. And that can make someone like Jimmy a pretty dangerous guy. And from speaking to people who've trained with him and who've watched him train recently, he's looking in fine form. And Skibinski, like you say, tough as old boots. He nearly got Burlington out of there in that fight. So again, this is one that could go either way. And I think not unreasonable to suggest that the winner of this one might be in the title picture by the end of the year, depending on what's happening with Reese McKee.
Definitely, yeah, could be. You'd see a guy like Jim Wallhead, who maybe is getting on in years, and fighting someone as tough and strong as Skibinski, and you might say, oh, Jesus, I don't know about that one. But I think Jim is such a tough man himself, I wouldn't be too worried about it. I don't think anyone's worried about Jim Wallhead going into a fight anyway. So I said, that's a meeting of two rocks in there, so I'm looking forward to that one. The fight I'm looking forward to the most, though, without a shadow of a doubt, Aggie Sardari versus Mike Figlak. What a great fight. This could easily be for the title without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, Sardari was the guy, until Joe McColgan came along and beat him. Mike Figlak is arguably the best prospect in Cage Warriors today. I'm sure, Paul Hughes and a few more will be giving out to me over that, but I think he's really, really good. He's right up there with all of them. I didn't realise Sardari actually had a fight only a few weeks ago outside of Cage Warriors, and he's coming back here again, which I think is really, really good. Get that loss over Joe McColgan, which was a year ago before that as well, out of the way, and come back with this tough fight against Mike Figlak. Sardari is one of those guys who I was sure was on his way to the UFC, honestly. After that Desmond fight, after the Jack Grant fight, Joe McColgan, it shows what a great fighter he is to beat him in such a convincing manner. But, he could be on another run back there as well. But Figlak is another guy who I really believe in as a great fighter. You like Oban Elliott, beat him, top prospect, beat Kieran Lister, beat Stevie McIntosh. They're the best of the best, as you can get in Cage Warriors. I don't know who's going to win this fight. I think, look, Sardari would probably want to take him down at some stage during the fight, but he'll be happy to kickbox with him as well. Figlak, I think, probably hits harder and is, a really good boxer if he gets there, but he can fight everywhere. I have no idea who's going to win this fight, and I'm sure it's one you're looking forward to sitting back and watching and commentating on.
This is the kind of fight, I joke about it quite a lot. It's the kind of fight that makes me want to call in sick. Do you know what I mean? I'll just turn up with a fake mustache and some glasses and a hat, and I'll be in the crowd with a few beers watching it. This is the kind of fight that I love Cage Warriors for. You've got a guy who's got a lot of experience, but maybe not the biggest name value in Sardari, former champion, going up against a surging prospect in Figlak. Where else are you going to get that kind of fight? Here's the thing, Sardari, like you say, he fought recently outside the Cage Warriors. He was granted a one-fight release to go and fight elsewhere because they just really struggled to get him fights on Cage Warriors. People are not queuing up to fight this guy because that win or lose, you look at his two title fights against Grant and against Desmay, that fight with Desmay was a war, and Sardari came out of it. Yes, it was a very close fight, but he came out of it without a scratch on his face. This is a difficult guy to look good against, win or lose. So quite rightly, you would say not many people queuing up to get stuck in with this guy. Figlak obviously just doesn't care. He's, him and his brother are cut from the same cloth. They'll fight whoever, whenever. So as soon as I heard that this fight was in the works, I knew both guys were going to say yes, and they have. And what a great fight it's going to be. Look, I'm not going to make any predictions for this one because I think it's absolutely pointless. It's a coin toss. There's a million different ways it could go. You wouldn't be surprised to see Sardari get a submission or Figlak get a crazy knockout or it be a 15-minute bloodbath. You just don't know. I expect the bookmakers' odds will reflect that when they go up. I just can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, you can't make a prediction for that one, but I don't think I can make a prediction for that one either. I don't know who's going to win. It's a really good fight. And it's definitely my most anticipated fight in cage warriors. Maybe of the weekend as well. I'm a big fan of both of those guys, and their styles are really, really good. God almighty, we could spend an hour talking about this card. We have to touch on another few fights that are really good as well. Do you know a fight I absolutely love? Jeremy Petley against Steve Aimable. Petley was supposed to fight in the card a couple of cards ago, and I watched a good bit of his fights. I loved his style. He's this... he's 14-9-1, so that you can kind of read into something about that. He goes out there and he leaves it all out there. He kickboxes, hits really hard, is really good. We all know what Steve Aimable is about. A really, really good fighter, and there isn't. I don't think there's a massive breakdown needed of that one either. It's got to be two lads throwing bombs at each other, and if it goes to the ground, they'll be looking for the finish as well. That's a really, really fun fight. This Tobias Harila versus Samuel Bark fight as well. I know Harila was supposed to fight James Hinden again. It feels like that fight is absolutely cursed. But you sent me a video there yesterday of Bark, wasn't it? And I was like, yeah, I'm sold on this one. We know Harila. The walk to the cage is nearly madder than his actual fights himself. Although saying that, his fights are pretty mad as well because he just walked forward and just destroys guys. Obviously lost to William Gomez, who has gone on and he's a fantastic fighter. He's fighting out in France now, and I'm sure Bellator and the UFC and all will be throwing big money at him to try to get him on their fringe shows going forward. He's an absolute star now as well. That's his only loss in the last while. Beat Decky McAleenan the last time out, was supposed to fight Petley, was supposed to fight Hinden. They ended up not happening on the last card, in that mad card, where everything kind of went wrong at the top. But it's on short notice, and anyone fighting Tobias Harila on short notice is probably not a good thing for him. But it's by no means a walkover. It could be a dangerous fight for Harila too, couldn't it?
Well, look, there's more to this as well, because these two guys actually hate each other. They really, really dislike each other. There's some beef going back a good few years now, apparently. Samuel Bark fought one of Harila's training partners in his last fight. And there was a lot of trash talk going up to that, and he was saying he was going to smash this guy, and that was the guy who gave Bark his only pro loss. But there's still been trash talk after that. Harila's sort of said, right, now you have to fight Daddy. You've already fought my teammate, so Daddy's coming for you now to send you to bed, kind of thing. The thing with Samuel Bark is obviously he's 4-1 as a pro in MMA, but he's got an extensive Thai boxing background. His nickname is Simone Dekkers, which is obviously a play on Ramon Dekkers, who was a legendary Dutch Thai fighter who had a really sick nickname himself. He's called the Turbine from Hell. That's the nickname he had in Japan. If you ever want to see the most violent highlight you've ever seen, watch Ramon Dekkers' Thai boxing highlight. It is brutal. If you're going to go around calling yourself after Ramon Dekkers, you've got to be mustard in the Thai ring, and he is. He's got a great reputation out in Thailand. From what I understand, Harila's going to go and want to slug it out with him on the feet. I think Harila's coach has said, let's see if Tobias can, dial back the crazy and be smart about this and take his man down. But look, these two guys are going to want to tear lumps out of each other. And given the personalities involved, I can't wait to see what happens. Combustible.
Yes, there's going to be lumps torn in this one, without a shadow of a doubt. I can't wait for it. Jesus, just listening to her, I'm like, God almighty, that's another one. Next Gen, big weekend for Next Gen as well, obviously with Paddy and Molly fighting on Saturday, but on Friday they've Nathan Fletcher and Luke Riley as well. Nathan Fletcher 6-1, Luke Riley 3-0 fighting Simon Kelvin. Nathan Fletcher fighting Margarian. Big weekend for that, Jim. Very, very interesting to see both of those guys. Will Curry is back here again. You could tell me the name of his opponent. Naglis Kanisauskas. I'm gonna go say it there, but
Kanisauskas.
I'm a big fan of Will Curry. Obviously, he lost, the fights to the champ, Christian Leroy Duncan, but has come back with 2 very, very impressive wins there. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he comes back here as well. We've Kingsley Crawford, who I'm a great fan of as well, against Rhys McEwen, Sam Spencer against Adam Amasinger and Leonor Kavanagh as well, who a lot of people are talking about as the next guy coming through. He's fighting Anders Sanchez. But you could touch on any of them ones as well, but Jesse Urholin versus Madars-Fleminas, like this is here, and I'm just looking at it. It's kind of I'm sure the exact lineup of the card isn't there yet, but it looks to me as like it's stuck in the middle of the prelims here. This could be a main event. This could really be a main event.
100%. That was one I was going to kind of bring up, because it does feel like that one's kind of going a little bit under the radar. Urholin is right up there in title contention as far as I'm concerned, and if he beats Fleminas, he's without a doubt in with a shot. I would love Cage Warriors to go back to Scandinavia. We've had some great shows out there, and Urholin you would think would be a great champion at 170 pounds. Madars-Fleminas, super dangerous guy, coming off a big win against Owen Elliott. Really, really awkward on the ground and on the feet. Urholin just absolutely relentless as a grappler. He's going to be shooting double leg from the first bell. I think that's going to be a great fight. And as you say, big weekend for Next Gen as well. Big fight for Nathan Fletcher, coming back from his first opportunity at the Cage Warriors title against a very, very experienced guy. I mean, that's an Ian Dean special, a guy with 35 fights that I've never heard of before. So looking forward to that one. And as you say, I think obviously, I'm a bit biased, but I think with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, nearly every fight on this card could be the co-main event of any card in Europe. Like it is that stacked. Ian Dean and Graham and the gang really have gone all out for this 20th anniversary. I think for anyone who hasn't got a ticket yet, I believe there's a few left. Get down there. It's going to be a huge weekend in London, and it's going to be a memorable night at Cage Warriors.
100%. And I'm just looking here as well. There's 15 fights in the card at the moment. Obviously, we were recording this a bit earlier, so I'm sure maybe 1 or 2 will fall off. Touch wood, there'll be none fall off, but the top 2 could fall off, and this would still be a brilliant card. It's one of those ones. I really mean that. And that you could, even for the UFC or Bellator or anywhere. That's not always the case these days, but I remember I was talking to you, but also someone else from Cage Warriors, and they were like, it's for the last few cards, like it's hard to get anyone on these cards because everyone wants to fight in this London card, and it feels like almost everyone has got on, and I'm sure apart from the lads who are injured and the lads that maybe didn't beg Ian Dean hard enough to get on the card, send him an old hamper or something to get on it, but God, what he has on it is absolutely amazing, and someone's going to emerge from this as a star. Like I think, look, if Figlak beats Sardari, I think Sardari is one of those fighters that, as you said, people don't know him that well, but this guy is unbelievable. And the fact when Joe McColgan beat him, I couldn't have been more impressed. And if Figlak does the same, I'll be unbelievably impressed. Like if Dylan Hazan at 8-0, both of those, what's Figlak? Figlak is let me just look here. He's 7-0. Dylan Hazan 8-0. Let's say if both of those guys win, obviously, Hazan will be the champion, but he'll be undefeated 9-0. Figlak surely coming up to be next in line at 155, and his brother as well, I'm sure, on the way as well, probably looking at Rhys McKee in the weight class above. It really could be a star-making night for either of those guys, and I'm sure Harila will have something to say as well about the title picture, and there's
listen, so can you imagine if something happens with one of the guys in the lightweight title fight? Who's going to have his hand up first, right? Harila's going to be right there.
There'll be a few of them, I'd say. Yeah, Harila will be, but we'll have Figlak. We'll probably have Sardari. Yeah.
I don't want to tempt fate, because obviously last time we were in London, we had that crazy situation where we ended up with 6 fights because everyone got sick or injured on fight week. And again, Harila kind of stepped up to save the day. I just think that I really hope nothing happens to any of the guys in the title fights, but I think if they do, Harila's going to be looking to come out of London with the Cage Warriors belt on his shoulder.
Is there a human being on planet Earth you'd not like to have coming in short notice to fight you compared to Harila? Probably not. I can't think of many worse at 145 or 155 anyway. But what a card, what a weekend, what a 20 years it's been for Cage Warriors. It's been a privilege to to watch from afar and watch up close a couple of times as well, and to listen to your commentary and the other lads as well, and watch all the great fighters like the 30 lads we just talked about, but also the McGregors and and the Daniil series and all the guys down through the years have done great stuff in Cage Warriors. So congratulations to yourself and Graham Boyle and Ian Dean and all the people for having a great 20 years, and here's to 20 more years of Cage Warriors as well, because everyone can give out about different promotions and different things as well, but do Cage Warriors, I think if you're giving out too much about them, you're probably giving out about nothing. So congratulations to Cage Warriors on 20 years. Congratulations on a great card coming up as well. I'm looking forward to this Friday night, and thank you very much, Brad, for joining me as always here to preview that lovely card. If you want to follow him, go over on Twitter and do it. What is it? At MMA Brad 4, isn't that it? Or am I gone mad?
At MMA Brad 48.
48. I always get it wrong. I always seem to get that one wrong. You'll find him over there anyway. Tune in to Cage Warriors next Friday night. UFC Fight Pass. We leave it there. My name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.